Many years ago, before the first skyscrapers reached the clouds, a boy lived with his father in a small countryside cottage. It was a secluded cabin, a good distance in a fair cluster of hills from the nearest village. One day, the father sat his son down and told him a trip to that village was due. "We need supplies for the winter," he explained. "It won't be long before the first snowfall hits and the journey will be too perilous. I want you to tend to your chores while I'm gone." The boy nodded. He was nearing double digits in age and felt more than ready to be left on his own. His father held him by the shoulders, making sure he was paying attention. "I shouldn't be gone more than a day and a half. Don't wander off in the dark, and most importantly, don't talk to anything that may come out of the old well." The boy could see the stone well outside the window, sitting at the edge of the yard where it always had. A rusty bucket hung from a rope attached to a wooden lever that hadn't been used for as long as he could remember. It had dried up ages prior, eroding further as the nearby stream became their source of water. Since then, he'd been warned of evil things lurking in just such abandoned places. "Bolt the doors at night," his father continued, "and mind everything I said before I return." The boy waved goodbye as his father drove the horse and wagon down the dirt path. He watched until they disappeared into the hills, then got to work on his chores. Milking the few cows they owned was first. Then came sweeping the house, fetching a day's worth of water, and tending to their garden in back. The old well caught his eye as he pulled turnips. Vines had overtaken some of the base, wrapping up the stone bricks in a stranglehold of greenery. A pang of fear rippled through the boy's heart as he stared at it. He shook his head and scolded himself for such childish thoughts. Still, the well sat there, in ominous shadow. The boy suddenly found himself standing up and walking towards it, more sweat forming on his forehead with each step. Just as he got within distance of peering down into the dark hole, he stopped, shook his head again, and turned back to his work. When the sun settled over the hills, the boy lit a candle and ate his dinner. When the moon rose to take the sun's place, he bolted the doors with metal locks. Any intruder would need incredible strength to break through. Then the boy ran over his list of duties in his head, and finding everything done, he took the candle towards the kitchen to read before bed. As he sat down, he couldn't help but glance out the window. There was the well, shaded and silent in the night. The boy tried to concentrate on his book in the soft glow of the flame. In the shed, the cows stirred in their sleep. One raised its head and gazed across the grassy yard, eyeing the same well occupying the boy's mind. The animal sensed something. It sniffed and climbed to its feet, trotting into the cool air of the evening as its ears perked up. A scratching. From the borders of the old well, two pale, bony hands arose from the darkness. Decrepit fingers latched onto the edge and began to pull. Before long, a fleshy mass surfaced, followed by another pair of gaunt arms and spindly fingers, tugging even more of the thing out of the well until it plopped on the grass like a wet slug. A third set of arms popped out as the back end slithered down the brick siding. Witnessing this, the cows set off into a panicked mooing, and soon the other cows were alert and joining in. The boy heard them and came to the windowsill. He didn't see anything at first, but then his gaze landed on the well and the monstrosity that had come out of it. He saw the stretching arms and goopy, tar-like skin oozing forward, but worst of all, he saw several bulging eyes in various spots on the creature's long body. As their petrifying sights landed on him, the boy slammed the shutters closed and flew around the house to shut all the others. Then he grabbed the candle and curled up on the floor of the kitchen, quivering as panic ran through his mind and the muffled sound of the cows continued. He watched the door and sealed window in the dark, barely able to breathe. The boy shut his eyes and counted to 10, praying his imagination had gotten to him. There was silence. Standing on shaky legs, the boy crept towards the back door and listened. Still, silence. Then a triple knock against the wood made him stumble and nearly topple the candle. A voice, soft and pleasant, lilted through from outside.
I know you're in there, little one. Won't you welcome a guest?
The boy stayed quiet. He hadn't expected an almost friendly greeting from whatever the thing was. Still, the words his father said were clear. Don't talk to anything from the well. After a pause, the voice returned.
Has my appearance frightened you? There's no reason to hide.
The kitchen shutters shook like a storm wind was pushing in from the opposite side. The wood creaked and groaned until finally the boy blurted out in fear. Go away! I don't want company! The shaking ceased.
Oh, but my company is special. I come from far away, and I know many secrets about the world, even things beyond it. I wish to share this knowledge with you. Only the luckiest people are gifted with so coveted a visit.
Secrets about the world? Beyond it? Curiosity seeped into the boy's mind, intertangling with his sensibility.
Any questions that exist I can answer. All you need to do is come and ask.
There were a great many questions bouncing around the boy's head, and thinking about them brought up even more. Certainly he knew better than to trust a horrid creature who'd slithered out of the dark, especially after he'd been warned, but he couldn't shake his interest in its offer. It didn't take long to make a decision. He knew that the thing wouldn't leave, and he'd have to deal with it one way or another, so he stuffed the largest kitchen knife he could find into the back of his pants and headed toward the locked door. All right, I'm coming out, he announced, resting his hand on the latch. But how do I know you don't mean me harm? A sound like the sliding of mud moved away from the door before it uttered a single word.
Chance.
The latch clicked open, and with his heart thumping, the boy pulled the only barrier between him and the sinister visitor inwards. It had retreated to give him room to exit the shelter, resting just beyond the garden line. The boy shuddered. Seeing it up close was worse. Tar-colored skin undulated around the eyes like liquid, each long and scrawny arm making small twitching movements down to the fingers. It had to be at least 3 times his length, shadows cast from the moon seeming to merge with wherever it ended. He could see no mouth on the long body, but as each pupil fixated on him, he could feel a grin exuding outward. Neither of them stirred, like 2 competitors sizing each other up. There was no question which was superior in their case.
Hello, child.
The boy was terrified, but did his best not to show the grotesque thing before him. He wondered if it could sense fear like a wolf or other predators. Working up what courage he could, he spoke firmly, hoping to establish a sense of control. Hello. What next?
Ask. Anything in your mind.
Anything?
Anything. And I will answer true.
The boy wasn't naive despite his age. What's the cost of this knowledge?
1 is a gift. More will require offerings.
The thing announced.
With each new query, more value must be added.
It was a game. The boy saw a hungry gleam in the numerous eyes of the creature and wondered if he had a choice to play or not. His fingers grazed the knife as he decided to continue, not knowing if out of fear or growing curiosity. Okay, I'll ask. What are you really?
I am a visitor from elsewhere, a bargainer. I seek elements of worth and give great revelations in exchange. Many wise leaders have risen from my counsel. Another question.
The boy thought about how he could test the answers. He looked around, and after a moment plucked a single turnip from the pile he'd made earlier. Then he took it, placed it in front of his guest without getting too close, and asked what his own name was. His spine turned to ice when the thing grabbed the turnip with one of its hands, seemed to absorb it through the skin of the palm, and spoke his full name. The boy shuddered and thought of more easy questions to ask. He paid first a few coins from his pocket, then with a horseshoe he knew his father wouldn't miss. Both were swallowed up, and both answers were right. Satisfied, the boy started asking things he really wanted to know. He learned about what was past the small patch of land he knew, of kingdoms on other continents, of empires rising and falling throughout time. He was told next about the deeper intricacies of his surroundings, like why the sky and everything in it moved, why the seasons changed, and the functions of humanity's many works. Valuables disappeared into the creature's palm. The boy was careful to use only his trinkets or forgotten clutter around the house. By the end, his fear had almost completely subsided. Excitement replaced it, so much he understood then and so much more there was to find out. The thing from the well shifted its many eyes.
There is little left to match the value of more answers.
Wait, the boy said. He scolded himself for wasting too many chances, desperately searching for something to offer, and a question worthy of asking. His gaze wandered towards the shed. A terrible idea formed, too late to push away before the thing caught on. It was already sliding towards the livestock before the boy could raise his voice to protest. Moos went up among the cows, who retreated into their shed as the oncoming blob of dark flesh and eyes surged through fence post and grass. A decrepit hand grabbed the slowest of them and dragged the poor creature backwards while it struggled. The boy ran. Still, he could not find his voice to shout. His feet wouldn't let him dare to try and stop what was about to happen. More of the hands grabbed hold of the cow, pulling it in towards the thing with minimal effort. The boy turned away when a loud slurping burst out, tears welling up at the sound. What followed was a leathery tearing, a squish of condensing meat, a few drips of liquid, and the strain of bone. When it was quiet again, the boy risked a look. There was the visitor, its eyes more satisfied than they had been, and no trace of the cow.
Ask, boy,
it ordered. Still wiping tears from his cheeks, the boy thought. He thought for a long time. A question eventually did arise, a big one that when answered could even make the gruesome loss of their animal worth it. You've told me about nature, but why are we here? People, I mean.
People, humans, you call yourselves, are here to survive, to consume, procreate, and live until they can no longer.
That's not what I meant, the boy protested. I want to know what we're alive for, what purpose. There must be more. Each eye once again focused their gaze upon him.
Be careful, child. The chasm you stand before runs deep, to where your tiny consciousness isn't meant to plunge. When this threshold is crossed, there is no way back.
Feeling cheated, the boy threw away etiquette. Fine. I want to know the truth then. About everything. For the first time, the creature asked the question.
Everything?
Everything. Even what you know about beyond, the boy confirmed. The thing's tarish skin rippled as a gurgling rose from within. Its sets of arms flexed and hands curled. The mass seemed to elongate like a shadow in late-day sun, sending fear back into the boy's heart.
I can give you the answers you seek,
the visitor uttered.
But the cost will be something you hold of equal worth. It is a priceless, fragile thing, and once gone, can never be reacquired. This is your last offer, boy. Are you willing to pay?
The boy swallowed, his small fingers gravitating toward the knife in his back pants. He didn't like how excited the visitor seemed. Doubt hung on, but it couldn't outweigh the chance of gaining knowledge beyond the sum of humanity. He'd be a wise man before he was a teenager, a leader of the world, even a king perhaps. So, defying the risk and his father's advice, he nodded.
Then our bargain is struck. And now, I show you everything.
By the time he realized his mistake, there was nothing the boy could do. The thing from the well poured forward like a black wave crashing toward the shore. The boy swiveled to run, but made it 2 steps before cold, clammy hands closed around his ankles and dragged him to the ground. Another latched onto his waist with an unbreakable grip of iron. He clawed at the ground and screamed as the horrible thing began to move. It slid across the yard like a slug, pulling its catch instead of what it had done with the offerings. The boy knew exactly where they were headed. Waiting in the dark, the old well became closer and closer, ignorant of the frantic struggle of child against formless beast. Inside the boy's belt, the knife slid around. He grasped for it, grazing the handle just as the monster reached vine-covered stone and began to squish into the hole it had come from. Forced to abandon his only defense, the boy grabbed the stone bricks before he was dragged into the well. An overwhelming stench of mold and mildew hit his senses and brought dizziness with it. He could tell the bony fingers wrapped around him weren't pulling at full strength. The thing was playing with him, savoring the terror, the pitiful desperation of prey, allowing it time to realize the doom that was near. Once they slipped into the dark pit below, all hope would vanish. Slowly the pull force increased until the boy felt his arms burn. He let one free and grasped at the knife, ignoring the sweat pouring down his face and the sensation that he was being pulled apart by the limbs. Just when he thought he'd never reach it, his small hand clasped the wooden handle and pulled it free of his belt. He stabbed hard at the bony arms clutching him. A gurgling screech came from the thing, slipping faster down the well, but not before its grip was loosened. 2 of the hands released with wounds oozing a thick black liquid. The remaining few clawed at the boy, and he stabbed back. As 2 fingers from the thing sliced away from the palm, another blood-curdling scream of rage and pain echoed up the well. Eyes flared in the dark. The last hands let go of the boy, except one that slid down to tear his pant leg and grip his foot. Pain ripped through his body, skin burning when an octopus-like suction began at the area. Grim fingers surged back to pull him into the shadows. The knife slashed through, more ooze spraying out, until finally the wrist tore away from the hand. A roar thundered through the bricks of the well as the thing plunged into blackness. There was no thud, no slimy squish of hitting rock bottom, only the fading howl and then silence. The boy chucked the knife and pulled himself over the edge of the well's surface. He collapsed in a pile, panting and shaking. He did not notice the severed hand still grasped around his ankle until an eye below the finger joints opened. It began to speak in the same soft voice and didn't stop for a long time. His father returned the next day to find the boy sitting quietly on his bed. The only thing out of the ordinary was a broken fence and a missing cow. When questioned, the boy muttered that it must have escaped in the night. They searched for the rest of the day in the surrounding wilderness, but found no trace. Looking at the new gauntness on the face of his son, the father did not blame him. It wasn't the first time livestock had escaped. The night returned, and when the hollowness stayed, he realized at last what had happened while he was away. "Oh, my son, it came here, didn't it? And you bargained with it." The boy did not meet his father's sorrowful eyes, but his head bobbed once down and back up. Arms wrapped around him. He felt no comfort from them and knew he never would again. He knew everything, in fact, every big question he'd ever wondered about or would have wondered about in his life. There was something missing, though he never felt it leave. It was like a perfect white cloud floating before him, but when he reached out, it evaporated in the young man's hand. The cost had been paid, and the answer given.